Thank you very much. Implementation of the 10 steps of program in Denmark is what I'm going to talk about for the next 14 minutes. You got my contact information for afterwards. I'm from the other side of the world, actually. So it's in Scandinavia, it's in Copenhagen, and what is in Denmark, and what is Denmark known for? Pastry, Danish pastry. It's even down here in New Zealand. It's also known for the Little Mermaid, which is actually little because when you go there, it's a normal size of a human. It's not like Americans believe that this is like the Liberty statue, but it isn't. But we're also known for the Danish crown princess, who is actually from Tasmania. Yeah, but now she's Danish, right? At least we love her. And she's soon becoming queen, but she was the patron of the European EMS Congress in Copenhagen for the last 3 years. So, but we're also known for the Danish case. That's what I'm going to report on. And what you can see here is survival in a 10-year period, doubling and nearly tripling survival, not only RUSC, but also 30-day survival. So 10 years of experience in 15 minutes, that will give, you can count it yourself, how much I got for each year, but I'll try to summarize it shortly. Tripling survival, how did we achieve that, and how to improve further as we have just discussed. If we go back to the first year that we actually had a registry collecting data, we had a survival rate of 3% in total. Bystander rate was 20% in Denmark, so that was a challenge. However, we had a vision. We wanted to improve at that time. We didn't know what was achievable, and we had no plan for that, doing that, except that we want to increase bystanders' CPR. So it was kind of a trial and error process throughout these 10 years, where we implemented different projects and saw the results in the end. But now I would say, when we look back, if we have had the 10 programs or 10 steps at that time, we have been able to do this much faster than we actually did. It can be done, we show that, but it can be done in few years actually, now that we have the 10 programs and a recipe for that. Just to document some of the data there shortly, published in JAMA. And this was actually coming out at a time where we had a lot of publication going out saying survival rate hasn't changed for 3 decades actually. Despite all we have been doing, it hasn't changed for 3 decades, being around 5, 6 or 7%. It's said at that time, except for Seattle, but otherwise around the world. But then we came out with this publication for 10 years, and you can see here, it was published in 13. Bystander CPR increased from 21% to 45%, survival to hospital, but also 30-day survivals. And what is interesting, even more interesting, is that 1-year survival is nearly the same as 30-day survival. So you can count on the 30-day survival as a measurement. And those who like graphs like this, you can see it here, it's the same. But when we look at the data actually, what was the major change in that period? It wasn't the witness cases, it wasn't the EMS witness arrest, it wasn't the number of shockable rhythm, it was the bystander rate that actually increased and tripled in that period. So this was not a randomized controlled trial, but this is an observational trial looking back, and this is the only thing we could actually find out that it changed was the bystander rate increased in that period and leading to a higher survival. And if you look at it, the upper figures here are shockable rhythms, and you can see that is nearly, and the red one is the 30-day survival, the black one is the 1-year survival, and we ended up with about nearly 40% of shockable rhythm being alive 1 year later. So this was very encouraging data. So we had a following up study. Did the survivors, or did those with cardiac arrest, return to work if they had been working at the time where they had a cardiac arrest? And because people were saying, well, you have more people coming resuscitated to hospital. They are being discharged alive, but are they going to a nursery home, or what are the final results for the outcome of those patients? And so we tried, and we were able to do that because we have a unique social security number in Denmark, so we can trace any patients if we get permission to do so for research. And what we did was actually looking at their income and what they were actually doing, working. 75%, just like Karen told you in Australia, that you hit the same rate, 76, which is a very good message to tell people. And the interesting part is also the last line there, that during that 10-year period, actually the percentage and the numbers of those returning to work have increased even more. It was lower in the beginning, it was higher at the end. So not only did more survive, but they did even better survival outcome in the end than in the very beginning. And then we had another publication last year looking at those who actually survived. I'm not going to show the video from New England Journal of Medicine, but you can go there, there's a link. And what that showed was actually those who survived out of hospital. What was the outcome for those people? As you can see, for those who actually survived, the bystander rate increased to 80%. They had bystander CPR in 80% of the cases compared to 66% of those in general. Defibrillation increased to 16%, and the rate of brain damage decreased very much from 10% to 7 to 6%. And most important is when we look at the data, and those who had bystander CPR and an AED was used, they were all fit for fight afterwards, going back to work, and nearly we had no brain damage or impairment afterwards. So this tells us that what is very important here is actually that we engage the community to do bystander CPR use and AED. We can do whatever we want, high performance CPR in the EMS or telephone or dispatcher assisted CPR, but if we don't engage the community, it's going to be very difficult to resuscitate people after 8, 10, 15 minutes. And what were the JAMA publication asks, what was the initiative that actually had this effect on survival? And we tried to list them here. As you can see, we have 3% of the Danish population in the first period taking a resuscitation course. At that time, it was like you told earlier today, it was a full day, 12 hours, or even 2 days. And in the last period, we turned it down to 3 hours and even 30 minutes. But now 5.5% of the Danish population do take a CPR course annually. It became mandatory to do CPR training to acquire a license, driver's license in Denmark, and also it became mandatory to, as part of the curriculum in elementary school, to teach CPR. I agree, it wasn't easy to get the politicians on board on this. But the general population engaged in that, and so afterwards it was easy for politicians actually to say, okay, let's do that, because it didn't cost anything, there were no barriers, and people wanted it. So it became part of the curriculum in elementary school in Denmark. We also had other things going on. The AED network was founded, dissemination of AEDs in Denmark. It started in Copenhagen as a project, and now it's national. And it's links to the dispatch center, so we put a lot of emphasis on that. And also we had, in the last period, we have a change. So the call takers used to be the police, but now it's medical personnel in the dispatch center. And that you can see here. We had medical personnel in the dispatch center in 2000 and between 10 and 11. And that made a huge increase in bystander CPR because there was a policy there, an engagement by the dispatch to say to people now we shall do CPR together to resuscitate this patient. So we increased from 43% to just 58% in actually in 1 month. And that also had an impact on survival. We have heard a lot about data. So here you get the Danish data. This is not just Copenhagen, it's national data. And what is interesting is what we discussed earlier today is actually what is the incidence of cardiac arrest, but also what is the incidence of survival or survivor per 100,000. If you compare, for instance, Norway and Denmark, the same population, nearly the same population, the same percentage of survivors, but we have 200 more survivors than they do have in Norway. And that is what counts. It's not the percentage, it's the number of survivors compared to the 100,000 population or 1 million. The other thing that we look at is the, as you said, the total survival. It is just I say, 10 to 0.4 in Denmark. But compared to the Paramedic 2 study that has just been released in New England Journal of Medicine, 5 excellent centers in UK doing their best, knowing that they are being monitored, and all data are collected and looked at very nicely, and they come up with a survival rate of 2 to 3% in total only. That's a surprise. To me, it wasn't a surprise that epinephrine didn't have that effect as somebody would expect, but it was a surprise that actually the survival rate was just 2 to 3% in UK in 5 major organizations. They are probably just as honest as they are in Beijing. They published the data where they said they had a survival rate of 1%. Well, and if you look at the shockable one, it's 43% in Denmark. But the interesting part is that in public places, it's increasing. So looking back, what we did compared to the 10 steps was actually we had a cardiac arrest registry, and that was pure luck that we started that very early, or that somebody started that very early. I didn't get into the EMS program until later, but somebody started it. It was collected, but it wasn't analyzed. It was just collected yearly, and no feedback was given. But we started some community programs. We started dissemination of AEDs in Copenhagen as a project, and it turned out to be national. But we also started AED or network new technology, try to introduce new technology like the AED network, so that the address or the location of the nearest AED pops up on the CAT system in the dispatch center when there is a cardiac arrest identified. And then dispatcher-assisted CPR we also looked into. So these were the things that we were doing, but mostly the community program and dissemination of AEDs. The effect was on the community program and less on the dissemination of AEDs. So these were the kind of part of the 10 programs that we looked in, and that had an effect. And what are we going to do afterwards? Well, or I tried to rate it here actually, seeing that we had and this was based also based on the EMS assessment tool that David Lacombe showed earlier. We had a program with looking at the assessment tool, comparing the 5 organizations in Denmark, and saw that we were actually rating us. Well, we were honest, but we were getting very close to the same rating in the national system. And that was fine, but it also told us where to put the next emphasis on how to improve. But this is my interpretation of it. We have a very good registry on cardiac arrest. We begins telephone or dispatch-assisted CPR. We did not have implemented high-performance CPR. We thought that we were doing so, but we never monitored it and we never gave feedback. We thought that we started rapid dispatch, but I'm not sure that that's actually what we're doing. We are working on that right now. And we had no feedback to the professional out there at that time. We established an AED program for first responders now, and we also use smart technology and identification of AEDs. And we make and of course the make CPR and AED training mandatory in school and community has been implemented. Accountability, yes, we didn't report that annually. We're going to do that now. We're going to do it more often because we're going electronically with our dispatch or with our cardiac arrest registry. And culture of excellence, I didn't dare to rate that one because, well, you just heard it, it's difficult to do so. So other has to assess us on that point. When we look at the chain of survival, we all know that, but probably it should look like that, because this is about the impact. So the impact on survival is in the first chain, in the first link of survival. However, most resources are used in the last one, in the in-hospital part. And maybe we should focus more on the first two link, or maybe even three, to improve survival. And that is what we did with setting up a national initiative, Resuscitation Academy last year. We started that in Denmark with all organizations being involved in this, and with the help from Andol and colleagues from Seattle. And we went through the process and also tried to define what to work with for the next 3 years. And this is what we are going to work with for the next 3 years. We're going to establish, or the cardiac arrest registry is being electronically, so that we can give feedback to the providers. We also want a telephone or dispatch-assisted CPR. We want to improve that quality improvement feedback, not only to the dispatchers, but also to the ambulance personnel, the paramedics, and to link these two things together so that they give each other feedback, not only on the call taking, but also on the registration that they make there, and the high-performance CPR that we are going into, and will give information to each paramedic for each call, actually. We are optimizing the rapid dispatch, and I told about this. And then we, as police and fire wasn't part of the first responder system we had in Copenhagen or in Denmark, we are going to start that. We started that with the fire now, and we had a meeting at the last Resuscitation Academy we had. We invited the national police, and they were kind of reluctant actually to go into this, you know, all the union stuff and who's going to pay, and we are busy enough. But when they heard Captain Jonathan from Seattle, they were actually convinced, and they said, we're going to go back to the national police and recommend this as a partner. And that is very good, to have international references on that it actually works in other places. CPR and AD training in schools, we're going to have further awareness about that. We're considering actually to try to introduce virtual reality in the teaching there. That's an idea, and you talked about the teacher should teach the pupils there in the school, but maybe the children should teach each other. Probably that's the best. So high dose, low dose, high frequency training is what we're going into. First responder with fire and police is what we're going into. Recognition of cardiac arrest by dispatcher is very important. I'll just come back to the project we have there. And optimal defibrillation procedure, we also changed that after having a visit from the Resuscitation Academy in Denmark. So the procedure is being changed to what you saw during last day. Yeah, and that's about it. So what we're going to emphasize is the first link or the first resuscitation team being the dispatcher, the caller, and the bystander there, because that's where we have the greatest impact. We don't have the Good Sam, but we have another project there, and we came to the same. We have had the same discussions as you had in New Zealand or in St. John's Ambulance, and we came up to the same conclusion that we want to include everybody who want to be part of that volunteer program. So you don't need to be a doctor or paramedics or have a certificate. If you're just interested, we trust you, and but most of them actually do have. But you can sign up for that, because that has been the saying in Copenhagen or in Denmark for years, that anyone can save a life without any pre-training or being certified. But we're setting up that project, and the controversial thing here is not that we're going into people's home. like you are, but the controversial thing is that we are doing it as a randomized controlled trial. So I believe in this. I believe that it does have an effect. We had a period of 3 months pilot testing, and it worked fine. And we actually got, I think we have 18,000 volunteers now. It's just in Copenhagen. So for a population of 1.8 million, we have 18,000 volunteers signed up for this Heart Runner project, we call it. But we randomized the alert to the people. And as soon as we know whether it does have an effect on outcome, we're going to stop that project. And then hopefully it's going to be implemented, but I'm not sure. We don't know. But I'm sure that it has an effect on what the paramedics are doing and what the dispatchers are doing, and I'm sure it does have an effect on all those who actually are first responders and volunteers, because we have a website for them, and they report, and this is the most positive Facebook website I've ever seen, that people are so positive and engaged in what they are doing. But we'll see the results hopefully in 1 or maybe 1.5 years from this randomized controlled trial. I would say we're working with Good Sam as well, but we just continue with this technical solution we have here. But we're working with Good Sam on the video part, and I think it's an excellent system actually. And then we work on artificial intelligence. We realized that it's important to identify cardiac arrest when people are calling, and our dispatchers identify 75% of the cardiac arrest when they are calling. 75. When I asked them, they said 99. I said no, 75. Because we went through all the calls and looked at it, and they identify 75. When you see figures, somebody saying they identify 90 or 95%, that's because they took away those that couldn't be identified. People were driving by, or they were a distant place from the caller or from the patient. So we included everyone. So we included everyone in that one, and then we identified 75%. We had a pilot on the artificial intelligence software in our system, and we came up with 90%. The artificial intelligence identifies 90%. So this is what we are doing now, is we add that to the CAT system, but we do is, as with the SMS or the Heart Runner project, we do it as a randomized controlled trial. So we just start here in August in Copenhagen, and every second, or about every second call would get an alert if there's a cardiac arrest, and every second will not get an alert. But we depend on the dispatcher's ability. And then we also we had a CCTV project recently, but now we want to include the Good Sam facilities there, so that you can actually turn on the smartphone camera and transfer that to the dispatch center, because we are quite sure that that's going to improve not only identification of cardiac arrest, but also of the bystander CPR quality, and that is of the essence. Finally, and this is my last slide, we have invited people for a hackathon in September in Copenhagen. And what is this about? This is about we want to improve survival by using more AEDs. We disseminated a lot of AEDs. We made them available 24/7. We made them unlocked. We made them available for the dispatch center, and people are knowing what an AED is in Copenhagen or in Denmark. But still, it's only being used in 60% of the cases of cardiac arrest. And the more people you get to use an AED early, the higher percentage of shockable rhythm you will have, and also survival, of course. So the idea here is to invite people from all over the world to come and compete, come up with new ideas. Well, what we do is we provide all the data we have, all the data from the dispatch, all the data on cardiac arrest, on geolocation, on time of day, availability of AEDs, social information about the population in a specific area, anything that is available in Denmark on data. We provide that for bright guys to come up with quite new ideas. 48 hours, a prize for the winner, a prize for the second and third, and then they can go back with their ideas, and we will have business people being there as well to help them to implement it. So now we're trying a new approach to new ideas to save more lives. So, and in the end, I have a video there, but you can find it on YouTube. It's just the case Denmark told in a cartoon. A very nice one summarizing it all.
It could happen
but I'll skip that.
to any of us.
I'll skip that one and then just go to the summary slide where you have, or please help me, Frank, to the summary slide where you just have more reference for the case Denmark and other information. So that was in short, unfortunately more than 15 minutes, but that was in short the 10 years case and what we have been working with and what worked and what didn't work and how we're going to improve. And if we have had the 10 programs at that time where we started, we would have be much longer than we actually are today. But it can be done, and in my opinion, this can be done in 3 years if you're committed. Thank you.